After your teammates run it down and die in Valorant, you're often going to be left in a 1v1, a 1v3, or maybe even a 1v5. Now, winning these rounds can be incredibly hard, but if you manage to clutch them up, you could deadlift your entire team and quickly shoot up the ranks and climb incredibly fast. So what can you do to become a clutch god yourself? Well, we're going to break it all down in this video. Now, the first question that we need to answer is, when is it actually appropriate to attempt a clutch, or when is it better for you to save? Oftentimes, if you are in insurmountable odds, it's better for you to take those abilities, armors, and weapons and just save them for the next round. So it's not always clear when you should try to even go for a clutch when it's like a 1v3 or even a 1v2. But the best thing that you need to ask yourself is, what do you lose or risk by failing? Did you just buy an operator? And if you don't freaking win this round, not only do you give that up to the enemy, but you can't buy for the next round and you're going to be very broke. Maybe it's better for you to save for all those reasons combined. But maybe your team is just stacked with cash and the enemy team is all alive and they have rifles anyways, so it might be better off for you to just go for it even if you die, because the reward is there, but there's really not much of a risk. Understanding exactly how difficult it is going to be to clutch is also important. A 1v2 might be acceptable, especially if you can find some other advantages that we'll talk about, but if you're in a situation where it's a 1v5 and the enemy has the spike down, maybe it's not even worth the risk. These are the hard questions you're going to have to ask yourself, and oftentimes you evaluate afterwards if you made the right call. Now, while a lot of people that want to clutch hyper focus on their aim, in reality, the bigger issue is their movement. They spend hundreds and thousands of hours in aim trainers just grinding out scenarios, but in reality, their biggest issue is they don't know how to use their movement to improve their duels and hit more shots. But luckily for you, we have a movement master in minutes course that will spill every good tip that pros use to move like a god. We can instantly fix your mistakes so that you could start fragging in nearly just 10 minutes. And we offer a rank improvement money back guarantee, so if you don't climb, you don't pay. So there's literally no risk, and check it out right now down below. Now, something that you're gonna have to learn to consistently do is isolating 1v1s if you want to win clutch after clutch. Everyone watches pros and streamers hit these crazy spray transfers where they're flicking from one person to the next, or they're getting a quick double kill when two people swing them. And while these things are really impressive and technically super cool, they're hard as hell to pull off. And we're not saying that you're not going to be able to do this and that you shouldn't strive to do these things, but even pro players themselves will fail these the majority of the time because they're that much more difficult. When you get double swung by the enemy, they have a huge advantage over you. And while you can make that up with mechanical skill, doing that consistently is unreliable, if not impossible. So oftentimes when the deck is stacked against you, when you're in like a 1v4 or a 1v3, you need to try to make that, instead of 1 versus 3 at the same time, 1v1, 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 and trying to win isolated 1v1s instead of trying to take them all at once. There's a couple things that you need to do in order to ensure that. The first thing is, oftentimes you're going to want to play aggressive and then passive, especially if you know the enemy is trying to claim space across the map. It's good for you to intentionally challenge one person while you can, then allow the enemy team to regroup and challenge you on their terms. So while maybe it seems appealing for you to go get the spike down in a 1v3, oftentimes if the enemy all rotate off their positions, come to you and fight you as at the very least one person defusing and two people challenging you, you're never going to have an isolated 1v1. But if instead you go and hunt someone down first, then get the spike down, then go hunt someone down again, you can set up a situation while as they are regrouping, that is when you meet them and that is when you fight them, so they're never going to be able to set up a 1v2 against you in their terms. You're always dictating the pace of play, which is really important. Now, this ties directly into taking advantages where you can. While you definitely want to isolate 1v1s, doing things like getting that spike down in a 1v2 situation, like I'm not talking about like a 1v5 or these insurmountable odds, I'm more talking about when things are close and then you can utilize it to gather information. That could be a really great thing, because in a 1v2, if you have spike down, someone at the very least has to give away their position about them defusing the spike, which could give you an advantage. Another thing that you could consider is how much time does the enemy have left to defuse or plant, depending on what side you're playing on, because after your team has traded out and everyone's dead, you might still be the last one remaining, but your team and you has helped to mitigate that clock down, making it so that the opponent's actions are more predictable. They don't have the time to rotate off and plant safely. So they're going to rush down. They're going to try to plant. And all you have to do is try to stop that plant. And then the enemy team is in a situation where they have to rush to try to get it down, trying to chase you down or trying to kill you. And all you have to do is play the clock. So using techniques like this is going to give you small advantages, even in a situation where on paper you should probably lose. Now, the next tip that I got for you is punishing lazy play. Have you ever been in a situation where you are in like a 1v5 and the enemy team just are like bunny hopping, running you down? Enemies are just pushing you in psycho. You might even been on the other end of this where you're trying to chase down that one person. Oftentimes when you are doing this, you're giving up all your information. You're not setting yourself up in a situation where it's a 2v1. Oftentimes you're splitting the entire map and just rushing it down. And if the opponents are doing this, it's very possible for you to pick them off one by one and just shut them down. Now, granted, you might not be able to win the round this way. You might not be able to have a true clutch because after you kill off a couple of them, they're gonna, start playing actually correct. They're gonna group up together, or they're not even gonna challenge you at all. However, you're gonna be able to steal a ton of economy off of them, and they could lose the game just because of that alone, just because you managed to kill multiple ones of them. But there are also situations where the enemy overestimate how much time is left. You kill two of them, you actually get the spike down, and then maybe the game is winnable in a situation where it never would have been if the opponents played strategically sound. Now, the important thing here, or in any clutch situation, is that information is key. And you really need to try to hide your information as much as possible. If you're in a situation where the only way for you to get that spike down or defuse is for you to like full book it across the map and hope and pray that you can win even when the entire enemy team knows where you are, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you have the means to utilize the clock and the time that you have left to seek out players, try to find people holding positions and try to isolate 1v1s while hiding your information, then you're going to give yourself a much better chance of actually winning. And this also means that after you kill somebody, you should do whatever you can to cut your information again. So it's back to the opponents not really knowing where you are. If you kill one person, recognize that people are going to be moving based off that information. So if you can reposition, reset your sound, and then try to lurk somewhere where no one knows where you are, that can make it so that the enemy are in the dark again, and then you basically level the playing field once again, and they don't have information about you, and you can basically scout around the map trying to find information on the enemy. This also means the element of surprise is super important, and being patient is super important. Sometimes you find somebody and they're not even looking at you, they're looking somewhere else. You don't want to shoot them right away. You want to wait. You want to hold your position because they will lead you into some other person on their team and you could get a 2-for-1 special. Another thing is you could actually deduce where their teammates are positioned based on where they are holding and playing, because if they're guarding a certain space or certain area, this lets you better deduce where their teammates are if you have no information at all. But this moves on to the next tip that you need, is knowing when you secured enough value and that you need to walk away. What I mean by this is that oftentimes you need to reevaluate if the round is still winnable and what you should do afterwards, right? Just because at the start you're like, I'm gonna go try for this clutch. On paper, there's not that much risk. I'm still going to be able to buy or save with my team next round. But as the time ticks down, as it becomes harder and harder for you to pull it off, maybe you already did enough, but it doesn't justify it anymore. Maybe you killed 2 people, but because of how long it took you to secure those kills, all of a sudden, clutching isn't really realistic. But a lot of players will come up with a plan early, and then they won't reevaluate, and then at some point, they should have just walked away. They should have just saved. But they kind of have this sunk cost fallacy where they already did so much, so they have to commit because then it's worth it. But you already did so much. I mean, really, you already got kills, you already got ult points, you already stripped away some economy that does add up. So it isn't 100% needed for you to just always go for the initial plan, right? So you need to reevaluate if it's still winnable and if it's still worth it. Sometimes it's better to just back off and save even after you made legitimate progress. Some things went right for you, they just didn't go right for you fast enough to make it actually possible for you to clutch. Now, this is double as important when establishing risk versus reward when investing into a clutch, because sometimes you're in a clutch, but maybe you killed one person and now you have an ultimate. And is that a worthwhile investment? Because now there's actually risks involved, right? It's not like it's zero risk, but if you can clutch it up, it's all worth it. But is it worth investing that Rosa ult? Is it worth investing that Cypher ult? And if you don't use it now, you can always use it again when the odds are more in your favor in a 5v5 or more at parity. But but maybe this clutch is so important for your team that it's something that you deem is worth doing. But oftentimes it does come down to how much that ultimate can be utilized when you're playing or using it with your team, and you compare that to the possibility of you winning the clutch. How stacked is it still in this scenario? At this time, is it even realistic for you to clutch up at all? And establishing that risk versus reward is super important when making these tough decisions, because that ultimate could be the difference in you winning or losing a future round, but it also maybe is worth it investing it here, but you're gonna have to make the tough call. Speaking of tough calls, what's not a tough call is the SkillCapped website, where we have everything you need to quickly climb the ranks, and there is a 100% money back guarantee, so if you don't climb, you don't pay. So there's literally no tough calls. It's the easiest rank up possible, so check it out right now down below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.